Hey, everyone from Hack Your Summer team to all the participants to everybody else. This is our third fireside chat and what we call our kind of main stage talks. And just to remember to orient you, we've got one of these each week. Last week we had Michelle Carre with the 5 million YouTube subscribers. We also had Megan Smith. This week we have Reid here. Next week we have Jeff Weiner. You'll hear this very soon in our announcement channel. We have Katie Coleman, an astronaut who will be coming and speaking to you. We've got Jen Polka lined up coming up soon also. We got just an amazing cadre of people that are just going to help give you a ton of input and ideas and access. Really, we want you to hear from how people navigated their career and so much more. It's one of the great honors to be able to do this with Reid. Reid and I have been fortunate to do this a bunch of times, and you'll hear why in a second. But it's like summarizing Reid's background is it would just take too long as there's so much there. But first and foremost, if I had to highlight to all of you why this is so important, first is company. As a company builder, Reid has been at the forefront himself, helping build companies, not just sort of at the top doing things, but as hands-on keys doing that from the very beginning. That includes PayPal, LinkedIn, Inflection AI, Manus, and there's a bunch more that haven't been announced and others that are out there. As an investor, he's backed some of the biggest names and been instrumental to their success. That includes Zynga on the gaming side, since I know that we have a lot of gamers in here, and we're going to get to that for Reid's advice on how to think about gaming as well, because I know that's a big area of interest for people. Airbnb, Facebook, Figma, Devoted Health, and many, many, many more. He's a New York Times bestseller. I brought my props, like Megan did, of books. There's a stack of books. I'm missing one of them because I think one of the kids took my latest one, which is a good sign. But like all his books are bestsellers on the New York Times bestseller list, the Wall Street Journal, you name it, they are often cited. And in fact, part of this that kicked this off of saying we should have Reid here was one of your posts in here about like ask somebody asking, have you read The Startup of You? It's really good advice. And so we said, it is really good advice. We should go get the guy who wrote that. At the same time, Reid was writing that. I was also writing the data science book. So I got to see firsthand and learn from Reid's process of writing, and very instrumental for me personally. Podcasts, if you haven't subscribed to them, you really should. Masters of Scale and Possible, they are two of my must listen to. You also hear them oftentimes on NPR channels. But probably the biggest thing, because one of the things that we have here in this program is you've got access to now 300 mentors in here. But the thing that people don't always realize is Reid is the go-to mentor for an incredible cadre of people that world leaders, startup founders, major CEOs, the Vatican, and much, much more. I mean, you can't ask for a better mentor. The thing that I would tell you above all else is that, and it often seems like Reid just might be that tech guy. If he wasn't doing a startup, though, he would have been getting, instead of LinkedIn, he was going to go get his PhD and doctorate in philosophy. And one of the things that's about this is Reid is one of the best thinkers, in my opinion, that melds the liberal arts side of the world, the creative side, and also the deep, deep technical aspects. So he can cover all the bases. For me personally, Reid is my first go-to call for anything that I've done, literally over more than a decade. And I'm also proud to be able to say that he's one of my best friends. So I am incredibly fortunate to be able to talk to people like Reid to get their advice. And so even with this program, one of the early people I talked to was Reid and all of his team being like, is this crazy? What should we do here? How do we think about this? And he's been a phenomenal supporter of the program in so many ways. So Reid,
But the frequent answer is it is crazy and you should do it. But yes.
exactly. This is Reid's thing is like, that's nutty. Yeah. Yeah, that sounds like fun. Let's do it. So Reid, I want to start with, a fair amount of this program is about that we've talked about is about building your network. and
Mm,
starting with the thesis of your network
mm,
actually is far more important than you realize,
mm.
particularly because it compounds over time. Obviously, I buy into that because of LinkedIn. You buy into it because of LinkedIn. But I think the natural place to start is for people to hear about your theory of networking.
Yep. So, and this actually goes back to your earlier startup view, which is it's really important, even in entrepreneurship, to think of life as a team sport, not as an individual sport. We always talk about it as individual sports, the heroic, iconic entrepreneur. It's, person one, person two, person three. But actually, in fact, it's teams that do things, and it's teams and networks that get you to scale. The other lenses on this, why is Silicon Valley over half of the NASDAQ? It's because of the network of Silicon Valley. It's not because of any particular individual, et cetera. There's a variety of companies that can only launch there. And part of thinking about like having a network orientation to your own life is the fact is like what are the really great opportunities for you? What are the ways to pull resources together and how to do stuff? What is the intelligence network that gives you differential edge in terms of what's going on? Including, already some questions rolling in on AI and so forth. All of that comes from your network. So then the question is, how do you build your network? Now, the problem is most of the people who identify themselves as networkers say, like, hi, I'm Reid. Can I have your business card? And it's like that's not networking. That's business card collection. That's the kind of the old school Dale Carnegie, which some of it's good and some of it's terrible in terms of how it kind of operates. And so the way to think about network is people that there's a mutual regard, a mutual alliance, a mutual willingness to answer each other's phone calls, help out on a phone call. Like if I'm trying to sort out, a wide class of problems, DJ's my first call. Like, hey, I'm trying to solve this problem. What do you know? Who do you know? Is there anything else that I should be thinking about when I'm doing this? And it's that group of people, and it is obviously naturally out of people you've worked with, out of colleagues, that just kind of natural increment because they then when they're tight with you, the other people they know are also then in your close orbit. But it's also, by the way, friends. It's family members. It's sometimes my network has grown because I end up sitting next to someone on a plane, long plane flight, and we talk the whole time. And we're like, hey, this person's really interesting. Let's stay in touch. And having that. And by the way, of course, LinkedIn embodies that because the ideal is you're connected to someone you know well enough to refer to someone else or refer someone to them on a case by case basis. It could be that person that you met on that long plane flight. Doesn't mean you introduce them to everybody. Doesn't mean that when they say, "Hey, I want to pitch DJ on coming to work for my crazy thing," I'm going, I don't know if that's good to DJ. I don't know if I'm going to refer that to him. Or, I want to pitch Reid on funding this. That's out of his zone. I'm not going to do it. But you have control in that. And that's part of what having that work is. So the way to think about it is don't just think about it as you as an individual sport. Think of it as you with a team, and that team is some people who are super close, some people who are moderately close, some people like, and then you're kind of doing that as you're orchestrating, whether it's your day-to-day work, your intel gathering and decisioning, whether it's your evaluation of things that could be risks or opportunities, AI, et cetera. And that's why network's important. And it comes out of the relationships of people who go, hey, I know this person. This is like, and we'll answer the phone.
Mhm. Can you talk a little bit about how networks compound over time? Because I think sometimes people don't always appreciate that the networks of today look like where people are going to go. Like like when we first met, it wasn't like we were all known quantities. We're quite
Yeah.
far from it. People were like,
Yeah.
"Who are you?" And then over time, you kind of grow into things, and your networks expand. But they only expand and work well if everyone is contributing.
So part of it is there can be different styles and different types of network, but part of it is, like everyone goes, oh, for example, very early days of LinkedIn, I want to get on LinkedIn because I want to meet Bill Gates. Bill Gates doesn't really want to meet many new people. And there is nothing you can do. Like, I just get that cold call email pitch just the right way, and it doesn't really work. The question is when you're at high energy, high talent people who care about you, then you've got serendipity across it. And part of the serendipity ends up being Like, I don't know, DJ, if I ever told you the way I met John Lilly was because I was talking to Sean White when he was in his PhD program in New York. And he's like, "You don't know John? You should know John." Right here, we're going to do this right now. And that's part of the kind of the compounding effect. Because if you're talking about the projects and relevant people and everything else, then all of a sudden, when you're talking to someone, oh, you should talk to so and so. And part of like my calculus when I introduce person one and person two is, will both people thank me for the introduction, even if nothing specifically happens for it? A job or an opportunity. They just go, oh, that was a cool person to know. I'm really glad that we have a connection such that in future we either of us know the context in which to call each other or build a relationship or anything else in terms of doing, and that's part of the compounding effect.
hmm Oh, if you think about the practical advice for people, you've given a lot of commencement speeches, and you think about the undergraduate level or master's level, people who are just coming into this tier of the workforce. How do they best start building their network? How do they start getting, engaged? Like, there's like a version that's like, what's your advice, maybe even to practical, like how should they use LinkedIn? What's a LinkedIn profile should they look like?
Well, so one on LinkedIn, it takes 3 to 5 minutes to put in enough information that it's actually, in fact, pretty useful. By the way, other people can find you. Yes, LinkedIn is used to be activity, but being findable is extremely useful. Because, for example, frequently the way I'll do it, I'll go, okay, who are the people who are 2 degrees out from me that might be useful to talk to about project X, Y, or Z? Something I'm funding, something I'm founding, something, da, 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 or, and I'll look. And if you're there, I might find you. I might find that, oh, you're connected to DJ. Hey, DJ, is Sarah or Bob a really good person to talk to about this, or possibly worth engaging in this? And that's part of the plan of having it there. And so now, it being fairly fulsome, it actually doesn't need to be the, how do I put on my glitziest suit and look like I am, you know, the deity's gift to perfection. Like that's not, like, sure, maybe that'll be helpful for some
No
recruiters looking
LinkedIn
at it.
maxing.
Yeah, but it's just not even necessarily worth the ROI. It's the kind of set of things about, here's who I am, here's what I've done, here's what my skills are. And by the way, it's fine if you're young. It's to say, like, for example, part of the advice that I give college kids right now is say, hey, look, you think because everyone's talking AI that AI is the brick, the barrier to entry level jobs. There's actually very little in AI doing current AI entry level, like blocking entry level jobs. Some, but very little. It's more overhiring from the pandemic, refactoring from remote work to in-person work, and like tariff war nonsense that's creating businesses to be like, oh shit, we can't hire new people. Because anytime they get to a, we're uncertain, we don't hire new people. So, but what do you do then is you pitch yourself as AI native. All the businesses know that they need to work to AI, and they know that their current people, including themselves, are a little old school, don't really know what to do. And you go, here's how I pitch myself as AI native. So, for example, when you're doing a LinkedIn profile, you could say, and here's all the stuff on which I'm AI native and could be useful, right? In terms of things, because it's like, what are the things that people you most want people to discover about you? And to give you a personal example of kind of kind of serendipity, one of my, kind of full-time writers, the guy who co-authored Super Agency with me, the way we discovered him is he put public intellectual into his LinkedIn profile. And when we were looking for the kinds of writers that I would want to work with, we went, oh, someone who's thinking about themselves that way would be the person I would naturally kind of gravitate on. We used LinkedIn to reference check even before we called him, so I had a pretty good reference. And we hired him the day after we interviewed him, and has been working with me for, oh, shoot, it's probably 15 years now,
Yeah, Ben is
right?
phenomenal.
Yeah. And so that's the kind of thing that you're kind of putting in your profile. But remember, networking is not like, let me get to the highest watermark, Bill Gates, whoever. Like, for example,
It's
part
not
of,
points.
yeah, there's a lot of interesting serendipity. So, like, for example, part of how I got some very good entrepreneurial advice was that um, my mom had worked at Wilson Sonsini and knew Brooke Byers. So I, she didn't have Brooke Byers' current email address, but I wrote to Brooke and I said, my mom, da da da, worked for you at Wilson and would happy to be, obviously a biased parental reference. But I just got back. I'm from Stanford and Oxford, and I would love to chat with you for a couple minutes on the phone about how I'm thinking about this. And he's like, "Oh, I remember Reid's mom. Sure, let's get on the phone and talk about it." Because that kind of then gives you, oh, you're not a crazy person. You're not like, even when you get really interesting emails, you're like, I don't know who this person is. I don't know if I respond to them. Am I getting into a tar pit? You
Especially
know,
with AI now on this.
yes, right.
It's
So,
hard.
so that's the reason why you use a network of connections. And, it doesn't have to be somebody who's somebody. It just has to be somebody who this other person like thinks, oh yeah, that's a person who's sane and I trust. Yeah, I'll have an interaction. And that gives you a much broader network capability.
What people may not even realize is like when I was coming back here to Silicon Valley, where I grew up early but had been away for a long time, the number of people that passed on my LinkedIn profile to you, Reid, was not small. Like that, I think that like people ask me like, how did you break in? How did you get this? Like, even though I grew up here, but I didn't have connectivity,
Yeah.
I knew people who
Yeah.
knew people who would put it in front of you, and then enough of them sort of showed up. I feel like that's what opened the door for us to have that first real lunch.
Yeah, 100%. Because two different people who didn't know each other said, this guy DJ, he's smart. Doesn't have any Silicon Valley experience, but he's smart, learns, capable, driven, self-motivating. I was like, oh, okay, that's good enough.
Yeah. And then the rest is like history. And this is
Yes.
like the thing I think a lot of people think it only is privilege, and they don't realize, no, 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 it's a network and the expanse of the network, and then that network vouching. And the other side I don't think people realize is your network is how we vet you or we get
Yeah.
our reference checks. So it's like maybe you could talk about your version of getting reference checks, because I
Hmm.
think your version is the version that I use.
Yeah.
And I think it's useful for people to hear it because this is what is coming when you are getting hired.
Yeah. So I'll say two parts of it. One part, which most people don't say, is as much as possible, even before I talk to someone, I try to get a little bit of referencing. Sometimes the quickest one is, hey, rate this person 1 to 10, or say call me. And if they say call me, it always means something is a little afoot, right? Like could be very bad, but it could also be that it's nuanced. The person has an anger management problem, but they're pretty talented. If you don't really care about an anger management problem, it's fine, blah, 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 those kind of things. But so early, because referencing is like I would hire on referencing. If you had to pick between referencing and interviewing, I'd pick referencing. It's always better. Because by the way, interviewing can go wrong both directions. It can seem overly compelling and actually, in fact, not that dedicated, not that focused, not that capable of working on a team, etc. Or the person could be awkward in an interview and be a great team member. So referencing much better. Now, the other part of it is you want to get off balance references before you hire someone, which is not, hey, I'm Reid. DJ is my good friend. Talk to DJ. Hey DJ, tell him that I'm like, the best thing since chocolate, blah, blah, blah. But to find other people who have worked with, have exposure, have knowledge, who are not part of the official referencing, right? It's kind of, off the balance sheet referencing. That's one that's important. And if you're really referencing before you get there, until you get to a negative reference, you don't actually have a full referencing. Everybody, myself included, has various forms of negative reference because, like, some of the negative referencing is like, even if I'm calling a reference of somebody who, Sarah says, hey, Michelle is my reference, and I'll call Michelle and I'll go find them checking the on balance too. And I'll say, look, what are Sarah's greatest work, like work development points, things to develop? And if you say something like, oh, too perfectionistic or works too hard, I will take you seriously. I won't take those as the as the kind of like, oh, I'm trying to give you a non-negative negative as a way of doing it, and I'll dive into it. Or if you say, oh no, there's no negatives, I'll say, oh, the negative must be so bad that you can't reveal it, right?
Right.
Because then they're like, oh shit, I got to say something. And by the way, you can frequently find out what the thing is because people's strengths and weaknesses kind of actually have flip sides of coins. Like, for example, people who are giving you authentic references about me will say one of the world's best out of the box random problem solvers in terms of like how to solve problems that no one's ever seen before. If they say like the best operational excellence of running the train system, they're lying when they're talking to me because everyone who knows me goes, "Oh no, no, that's not Reid's strength set. He needs other people helping him with that." And by the way, that's part of the reason why you're going to have Jeff Weiner. Jeff and I
Yeah.
partnered on LinkedIn in that because like Jeff's super good at that, and that's why we kind of partnered. And he has other talents too. It's not just that, but it's like it's the strengths and weaknesses kind of go together. And so you can see what the shadows is. And if people aren't saying these are some of the areas where this person is less good, which you can supplement with a team, it's different jobs, it's different strengths in terms of what they're doing. That's actually, in fact, useful to how you play out. And those are all some of kind of like the referencing techniques that I use to make sure. Because by the way, the last thing is frequently there's this A talent, B talent, C talent. The insanity of this stuff is not all A talent is suitable for a particular job or suitable for a particular team. There's like polarity, magnetic polarities. There's kind of what kinds of things you're good at. Like, for example, you said, well, Reid's an A talent. Let's hire him to run the McDonald's. Oh my God, is that a disaster? Right? That is not the right, that's a mistake for everybody. So it's kind of the way of kind of understanding this. And then, by the way, all the way back to your earliest questions of, for example, like what should you putting in your LinkedIn profile? It's not the I am good for everything, because by the way, anyone with experience doesn't believe that. It's like I'm really good for these things, right? These are the things that I have talent on, capabilities, et cetera, et cetera. And that's the kind of thing
Right.
to kind of focus on this.
So just as a reminder, we have the Q&A. We got a bunch of questions. I'm going to actually jump into some of these real quick because these are good ones.
Mm.
Also on our the event chat in our Discord channel, make sure to put your commentary. This is where you guys are engaging with each other, having general conversation as well. Reid, like I want to first before I go to these questions, you have covered a wide area, surface area of exploration
Mm.
early in your career to figure out what you wanted to do and what you wanted to work on. For the students that are out there, those that are graduating, what's your advice for them to find their niche or their methodology for how to explore the range of things that also some of the range of things that are just over the horizon, you can't quite see them yet.
So, not surprisingly, because I gave my very first commencement speech on this and that became Startup View, it's another Startup Review reference, which is the typical advice, which is necessary but not sufficient, is what you're passionate about. Because you can't be world class unless you're passionate. This is the kind of the discover your parachute, what color is your parachute? Oh my gosh, you love photography, do photography, kind of a thing. Very insufficient, right? So the passion is necessary, but then you also have to look at kind of market realities and competition and kind of the trajectory that you're kind of going through. So you go, for example, like I'm really passionate about photography, maybe I should be considering design, graphic design, being an artist, something else. Like, okay, but you got to kind of look at what is the pattern of that. You go, well, maybe what it is, I have kind of like a visual sense of this stuff. And this visual sense is now being massively amplified in the age of AI. And it isn't like, oh, I'm just going to do photography with AI, but it may be well, what are the kinds of things that AI is enabling as this kind of exploration where I could be one of the leaders where there is not very good kind of market competition. There's growing market opportunity in terms of what the markets are. There's needs for this across a number of different organizations, a number of different leaders, and that's the angle which I go into. So it's this, Ben and I talked about this in the Startup View of kind of like bringing these together. It isn't ignore what you love or ignore what you're passionate about, because if you, by the way, hate it or are very flat on it, it's very hard to be passionate. But you need to connect that to the trends of where there's market demand. It's a little bit like say, hey, I've got this great idea. I'm going to be creating these new kinds of pens that everyone's going to use. Like, well, you got to think about what is the market demand for pens. You may love creating that kind of pen and all the rest, but what's the market demand for it? Because that's actually how, economic demand goes. That's how like strategic opportunity goes. That's how career growth goes. And so you want to be intersecting those. And then back to kind of network questions, you go, well, okay, so I'm passionate about, um, photography is the early example. Well, what could I be linking that up to? Where is their market demand? And that's why you start talking to other people to kind of get some sense of it and doing some work on that in order to do that. And that's part of how you go from here are the things that I am very capable on, very interested in developing. And by the way, generally speaking, if you want to kind of a measure of what you're passionate about, is what do you wake up on Saturday morning thinking about?
Yep. It's funny because the one I say is like, when you wake up, what's the first thing that goes to your mind? Like,
Yeah.
where do you want to spend
Yes.
your time? And
Yeah.
so, actually, before we go to these questions, because I think we're going to come, I want to take a non sequitur from these question lines because so many people have asked about game design.
Mhm.
And but people don't also realize is we had very fearsome games of Catan over the years. But also, you have been really a game designer from early on, like when you were in high school, you were a game designer.
Yeah.
Uh, and so, maybe talk a little bit about how you think about game design and advice for those that are specifically working on projects around game design.
So let's see. So I think there's a lot of depth in game design, which can apply to a lot of things because it's not only just game design. It's actually, in fact, when you look at app, consumer internet, a bunch of other things, a little bunch of project game design plays to all of those things. It's one of the reasons I think it's a general purpose skill in addition to doing whether it's game design for mega games, Grand Theft Auto coming out soon, or console games, but also web games and other kinds of things as ways of doing it. Now, that being said, it's of course one of the areas that is going to be mammothly changed by AI because part of the like now everyone can generate apps because if like literally I know people with zero coding who have generated iOS and Android apps that are functional and do things. Like, for example, uh, a ceramic specialist said, hey, in terms of like making these different choices and colors and everything else in ceramics and being able to index all the knowledge, I create an app. And now that's part of my exposition. That's going to happen. Now, and so games will also be part of this. And there's a bunch of stuff coming on the game side. But by the way, this is still the area where the taste and network and ability to do it kind of really matters. And it's one of the areas where you have to also look at yourself as where am I competitively with other people? Because games design is one of the things that lots of people have exposure to games. And so therefore, lots of people go, oh, because I have exposure to it, I have some sense of it and I can do it, which means the bar for the general use of it is very high. And by the way, again, a good use of network is am I not just the way I'm passionate, but am I uniquely good at doing this? Will I have this edge in this area that's very competed? Because by the way, my first job was user experience design. As you know, I made a knockoff of Settlers of Catan that I've given to the two sons of the creator of Settlers who grew up playing Settlers as part of this and so forth. And I didn't presume to do a lot that's different, but like I don't think of myself as a fully capable board game designer because there's a lot of people who do that, and I don't. I only do it as a minor hobby because I understand that in order to get into doing it well, you really have to be differential, right? And so that's the kind of thing. It's part of the reason why it's like it's a good area. It's an area that will be amplified by AI and its relevance. It's an area that you can apply to a lot of different areas. But if you go, what I really want to be doing is creating competitive games with other people. There's a lot of people going to be creating games. Then you have to have a specific theory of that, and your network can be useful on that.
Mhm. Yeah, it's interesting because I think one of the things that I learned in the early days of LinkedIn is when we were playing Settlers of Catan, it was like it was sharpening our skills.
Yes.
Like, the gameplay made us so sharp and so effective for the hard decisions. It was like a phenomenal training ground, if you will. It's scrimmage for us to do things. So we got a bunch of questions here. Sandhya, who asked a question, just want to ask her, can you repost your question, but clarify a little bit more of what you're asking about on policy? But I want to go first to, and I'm not sure I can say this correct. Is it Celis or Celis? And it's really on the topic of networking. How do you stay in touch with companies that you might want to work with in the future, or how do you create connectivity to organizations that, they may have rejected you or they're just a little bit out of reach, but it's kind of your dream home to get there.
So, um, so connecting, is one of the things that's then very useful when you just think about like finding a trusted connection to the company, right? It isn't like the exact right hiring manager. It isn't the CEO. It's a, hey, if I love, call it, you know, uh, company X, could be Apple, could be, you know, any number of things, could be Figma, right? Speaking of company that you and I love the founder of and have spent a bunch of time with and invested in. Um, so, um, so the question is then, okay, like an LinkedIn connection, you go, like I would go and look for Figma, second degree, see if there's anyone there. Go, oh, it's DJ. Hey, DJ, do you know this person well enough that you could introduce them to me so that I could ask to have a Zoom call with them, a coffee, and kind of get to know them? Because as opposed to the, oh, I'm looking for a job right now, which is, by the way, a high load. And it's like, oh shit, got to navigate things and that could come up. But it's just like, okay, great. I'll give some advice. I'll talk to the person. And then, by the way, you get to know them and you know what kinds of things interest them. You go, hey, remember you and I were talking about image generators? Here's this new, really cool image generator. And here's some shit that I did with it. I just want to make sure you know about it. Right. And then it begins to show that, this is a bi-directional relationship. We're helping each other. We're doing that. And then you can have multiple contact points within a company. And then as you go, I love this company. Then part of the thing is the follow-up after you've established a light relationship. It's not just, it's about me, 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 me. It's about us, right? It's like, hey, by the way, it's been my dream to work at Figma. If anything comes up, let me know, right?
Yeah.
Or hey, I saw this posting in this group. Do you know the people in that group? Could you like tell them that I'm actually like an interesting, committed person and so forth? Because by the way, that's maybe the only thing they need to know in addition to LinkedIn profile, et cetera, et cetera. Those are ways to establish new connections. There's ways to be in connection with companies that you actually already worked at. That kind of thing is an important thing. And the really important part of all of this kind of networking is that it's about us, not about me, me, me. What can you give me? What can you give me? What can you give me? Because it's like I don't want to engage in a relationship where it's all about you.
Yeah,
Nobody
the
wants
giver
to do that.
versus taker. Like
Yes.
if you're just a taker, you're like, ugh.
Yeah.
It's interesting that you point out this, Reid, because like one of the things I think that I'm just reminded of is some of all the best hires we've had over the years. Like after you've talked to them a couple times, they like reply with this detailed email of like, I thought about our conversation and I took it this much further, or I built a prototype. I wrote a memo. I did something with it. And you're like, oh my gosh, you're thinking about our problem this much? We have to keep talking. And then the second part is how often people forget to nurture their network of being able to say, like, stay in touch. It's not just being connected on LinkedIn and just posting that's not networking. It's
Yeah.
it's a collaborative thing.
Yeah. It's I care about you. I care about our relationship, and I think of it as an us thing.
Yeah. One from Mitchell, there's a question here, which is, how do you communicate with others your value when you've just had, when you've had a foot in both the technical and liberal arts side, but your career path isn't laser focused yet?
Well, my career path certainly wasn't laser focused. While I did my undergraduate in AI, I went on to do a graduate in philosophy. And I actually think that one of the things that's interesting about AI is that it's going to amplify the importance of humanities. It's part of the reason I gave a couple speeches in Italy, Bologna, Perugia on, kind of AI, Silicon Valley, and the Renaissance as part of that amplifying it. So I think it's important. Now, in terms of focus, um, people sometimes need a very specific in-depth focus. If it's like, oh, look, I'm really going to be, you know, like an in-depth computer architect, or I'm going to be the primary lawyer in a set of things, and you need to then identify that focus and work towards that. And you want to try the focus on, even if you haven't. You can change your focus, by the way. So it's better to like in these cases choose a specific focus, work toward, and then change it if it doesn't work. But if you're in a zone where you're like, look, I am got some set of different things, then what you want to be doing is saying, hey, what are the things that you're committed to, ambitious, hard working on, will be a like a solid team player. So for example, my very first job, which was at Apple, they were like, well, we have a user experience job. And I'm like, well, I don't really want to be a user experience designer forever. And they said, yeah, but it's solving the problems that no one's ever really solved before. And we want people who are willing to throw themselves at it, be like develop the skills that they need, even if they don't have it, and do it with rapidity. I said, oh yeah, that sounds fun to me. I'll do that. I'll commit to that. I'll be focused and intense on doing that. And so that's the kind of zone and dialogue you're trying to sort out as you're going.
Mhm. One of these ones that's in here is about that, sort of that blending of your backgrounds that make you more unique. Is some people are asking about how does your philosophy background help you these days, specifically as you're thinking about AI? And some people were also asking about, well, you're doing a bunch of work with the Vatican. That's not an organization as you think is normally tech savvy historically. And how do you help? You're often this bridge and conduit as a result.
So, by the way, that is like look at the areas that are unique, and one of them is I'm much more humanist background. I'm not like, oh, I got a PhD in computer science. I've got a master's degree in philosophy and an undergraduate in artificial intelligence, which, some of my CS profs, and that's CS light. You should do CS heavy, as kind of as a vector. And it's kind of like, what are the set of problems? What are the set of things that people would pick you to be a team member on, be a team lead, engage in, invest in, and how do they intersect to those? And so now on the Vatican side, Pope Francis, went in 2015, went this AI thing. This is potentially long-term important to humanity, and tasked a set of different, priests with kind of setting up a working group. And it was, kind of an honor to kind of be one of the people to be helpful to them and kind of navigate that through. And part of the reason I did is because they're like, look, we care about this impact to humanity. We care about this impact to, what's going on for, the, over a billion people who are part of the Catholic lay, and then also societies, even Catholic or not, in terms of doing it. And so it's like that, kind of being helpful. And I was bringing the various technologists who cared about society, not just about, technological business and invention. Now, so for me, philosophy has been useful in a lot of ways. It wasn't useful in the initial reason I went to go do it, which is, can it give me a model of what thinking is? Because part of what I concluded is artificial intelligence people didn't know what thinking was. By the way, I still think none of us really know. We've got some puzzle pieces and we've got some lenses, but the assembly of it is kind of a little bit of like, well, we kind of know it when we see it in various ways, but we still don't have a really good coherent theory of what intelligence is. What are the different forms of it? Because you then say, is current AI intelligent or not? And the answer is, in some ways yes, in some ways no. And human beings in some ways really yes, in some ways less so. And what is all the way lining up? We don't know. That was part I was going to philosophy about. But what philosophy helped me with was kind of articulated. Let's take my investment thing, is what's a crisp investment thesis? What is betting on this company, this person, this project? What is my clear, coherent thesis of investing in it. But it even gets to kind of questions around like, okay, so part of an investment thesis is this this belief that there will be a future market for a product or service like it and shape. What is the details of that? What is this kind of future anthropology bet that I'm making? What is the bet that I'm making on human nature and the human desire for a product in this future circumstance? What are the iterative stages for doing that? Philosophy kind of helped all of that. Now, most recently, part of the question is saying, okay, how does AI change our epistemology? Well, actually, in fact, I've been going back to Wittgenstein and other things and thinking about this because it's kind of the question of how do these language models embody epistemic artifacts where they are gathering certain kinds of knowledge and information and reflecting it to you. How should that change our epistemology? How should it change our beliefs in the world? How should it change our metaphysics, our theory of metaphysics of what should exist in the world? So philosophy is useful across all of this stuff, and in ways that is much more useful than if I just had a CS degree. Now, CS is also very useful in various ways. I'm not a like I'm still a very pro, I did a bunch of CS classes at Stanford that CS is useful because we're having kind of in the AI transformation of the world, that's the million X amplification of the software transformation of the world. Anyway, so those are some
Yeah.
personal lenses on the humanity side of it.
The other one that I think is important, especially the way you and I worked in the days of LinkedIn, is we were faced with a bunch of what you might call ethical slash moral questions of which way to take the product. And I remember I was thinking, wow, thank goodness I had kind of the equivalent of two minors in psych and theater, and then had been forced to read Karl Popper and a bunch of philosophy because it gave us common language to distill the problem down to a very clear delineation of issues. Like, if we choose this path, here's what good happens, here's what harms happen, here's this. Like,
Yeah.
and without that, if I only had one side versus the other, I think I could have never, we wouldn't have been able to solve those problems collectively.
Yeah, and it's another thing because obviously, as tech becomes more and more important to the very infrastructure of society, the very infrastructure of humanity, the ethical questions become a lot more urgent. And philosophy is useful here. I wish philosophy were more dispositively useful. A lot of philosophy of ethics tends to be very meta ethicsy and very much like, you can't derive a should from an is. And it's like, look, the real question is we're making judgments at speed, trying to be good people in what we're doing. What are some of the ways? Because like frequently, the more interesting question in ethics are trade-offs, right?
Mhm.
And like what are you prioritizing? Because like some people say, well, the really important thing is to do what's valuable for 50, 80% of people. But the other people say, no, the really most important thing is don't screw the bottom 5%, right? Or other people would say is create as much prosperity for society as possible because that prosperity will eventually benefit all of society. All three of those are morally coherent positions, right? And then kind of how do you balance off against them as you're making decisions on this specific set of things? And then of course, people frequently like to ask the kind of legitimacy question is like, well, what gives you legitimacy to do that? And the basic answer frequently is because if you're thinking with the right kind of virtue ethics and kind of doing that, and you're making sure that you're cross checking yourself with other people and not being a narcissist, the answer is the way things happen is small groups of individuals go make them happen. And you try to do that from a virtue ethics and a legitimacy point of view, but you don't try to go get a 4 billion people vote yes.
Right. The a number of people here are asking also about, well, actually, let's before we go to the AI full place, because that's a big chapter. A bunch of people are like Ramesh, Vedant, a number of others are asking about networking. Do you go to professional networking events? Do you like where do you go to meet people? Some people are asking questions like, how do you start a conversation? How do you have a coffee chat with that? Um, I think of the version which is like I met Dylan sitting next to him at a conference and just asked him what's interesting to you, and something that I think I've also appreciated from you leading into these questions is first trying to find a way to ask a question where you can just listen
Mm,
rather than talk. And so
yeah.
maybe take that and then go into your advice on these dimensions.
Look, it's better to ask questions than make statements, generally. Um, and um, generally speaking, is like, look, anything particularly really exciting to you, and don't feign excitement. If the person said, "Hey, what I'm really excited about is counting comets," in astrophysics, like, oh, huh, that's cool. Like, never met someone like that before. Not that interesting. What other? Let's go to other interests. Like, and that's fine because people will go, "Hey, you're being genuine with me." But like asking questions, being genuine, and then kind of building it to, because frequently when I'm kind of sitting down with someone and just getting to know them, I'll say, "So, like, what are kind of things that are really exciting to you?" And I'll go, "Huh, this thing parallels this thing that I'm pretty excited about. Do we have an intersection here?" And people are cool with, "Hey, we're exploring it," right? Because they go, "Well, not really." It's like, "Oh, well, what about this then?" As a version. And, the way that people, decades ago used to explore this is like, "Hey, which movies have you really liked?" Because it's like we all saw a small number of movies and we find one that we really liked, and that could be a basis for starting a conversation. You don't need to do that. And people are perfectly good with, "I'm looking for something that's interesting," when I'm genuinely curious about what's interesting to you, right? I'm not just trying to get to what's good for me. It's like, "Oh, that's really nice. You're interested in comments. I'm actually really interested in kind of like, modern ceramics. So let's talk about modern ceramics." Like, well, but I have no interest in modern ceramics. you know,
Right.
it's kind of like, so but the hunt is not uninteresting, as kind of way of doing it. Now, sometimes you'll find people like, I'm just literally have zero interest in talking to or meeting new people. Um, then, you can give up, move on to someone else. That's frequently a thing. Or you could say, by the way, personally, what I've been really interested in is how AI is going to completely upend, taking me, our concept of epistemology and philosophy. And the person might go, "Huh, we'll say more about that." That's the thing you've said is interesting enough to me that I'll double click on it, but don't take it as like a do or die with this person. It's when it's being kind of genuine. It's two people sitting there talking about it. You're just trying to find an area where you're both interested and passionate. And that's part of the reason why it's not business cards. It's not like, what do people get asked all the time? "What do you do for work?" Okay, press play. Fine. You're like, "Well, I'm really interested in your work." Well, look, well, that's nice. Right? Like, I got a whole kind of work thing kind of going on. So it's kind of, it has to be something that's like, what's a genuine, like the two of us, because then it has a possibility of going somewhere interesting.
Mhm. Let's switch well, actually, Vidal, I'm going to give you one thing. It's like professional
Hmm.
networking events versus other areas. I would always pick an event where it's like birds of a feather flock together rather
Yes.
than a general
Shared
event.
interest.
Shared interest. Go to a
Not
meetup
shared
where it's
interest
like,
of, "Hey, we exchanged business cards."
yeah,
Yeah.
it could be like screenwriters get together. It could be AI people to get together. Whatever it is, go where there's common people and don't be afraid to explore them. Read a lot of questions, obviously, on AI and the advice you're giving students today. One of the things that's interesting, I think a lot of students, there's um, we're hearing from the participants a couple different things. One is people are like, where should I use AI? Where shouldn't I use AI? There's some questions where people are trying to wrestle with that. The others, there's a lot number of projects that are there where I look at it and I go, ooh, like basic vibe coding would help, or other more sophisticated AI tooling would help. And so maybe what's your advice for people first on a practical level who are building projects today in this like over a 4 week or an 8 week sprint to make the most and to use AI systems?
So, um, the hopefully this first part is not news to anyone who's here, which is the kind of like ask AI, whether it's Claude Code, Codex, other things of a generic thing, like make me a fun game, and it doesn't really generate very much, is not a surprise, right? that it's actually, in fact, the detail and edges of kind of how you kind of direct, orchestrate, conduct into things really matters. Like, for example, part of how you get really good work out of things is you, as it were, compose a team of agents that, like, first one does this, second one elaborates, third one cross checks, etc., and is kind of cycling back and forth as a general way of doing it. AI is very good at assigning roles. Like when I was doing super agency, it was kind of like, okay, so you are an absolute expert at history of technology. What challenges would you write to what I've written? What did you say I've been too simplistic about? What would you say that I could, use as further elaboration or defend my position or call into and use as examples for what I'm doing? This whole kind of thing is a kind of a cycle of it. And so when you're creating things, that's the same thing. Now, you can get an amazing amount of stuff going with AI these days. Like the 0 to something really substantive is uh, unprecedented in human history. It's part of the cognitive industrial revolution. So getting into it and doing details and iterating, don't just presume one pass, but kind of going into it. And then, like the minor things, like even within chatbots, you do a prompt, gives an answer, and says, well, cross-check your answer and do better. It wasn't good enough. And funnily enough, unlike human beings, it will do better. So one of the things that I generally think about all of these AI models is they're aliens who've been trained really intensely to be very like human beings, right? So in lots of things they're like human beings, but in other things they're not. Like for example, oh, that wasn't good enough, just do better. Oh, that wasn't good enough, just do better. Human beings very rarely respond positively to that. AI models do. And so exchanging kind of like what the kind of like the tools and techniques, like for example, like what skills are you deploying into your, and I use Hermes more than OpenClaw, but Hermes environment in order to do that is important. As about like like the old kind of networking things that were like, who else should I talk to? Like, who are the top three people I should talk to? Which is a very good thing to do when you're talking to people. It's also like, well, what are the AI techniques that you're using that have used well that really allow this to work and produce things that are really, really good? And you want to be in that iterative loop. And if you're not learning new things, call it in every couple hours of how you're using AI in order to be better, you're not learning fast enough. I
Mhm.
mean, it's just like that's the bar.
One of the ones that you taught me early on, actually, in using these systems, because I like the alien analogy, it's such a good way to think about it, is we'll have this thing interview you about your project and just have it actually act as program manager or product manager, and it asks you a bunch of questions that helps clarify your thinking.
Yeah,
Uh,
exactly.
Reid, when you think about for students these days, obviously you're a fan, and you've talked about this. You and Parth have talked about this on Possible. We'll link to those podcast episodes with Parth because I think they're a great way to get started with AI tools. When you think about the skills that students need when they're balancing their coursework and all these other things, the costs of using these AI tools and all of these things. Do you have a sense of like what students should be doing now to really show that they are AI native?
Well, I think the um like it's almost like, part of what you need to have is a little bit of a corpus of AI work. It's so easy to create some things that are really interesting that creating some examples of like high quality, kind of outputs, which can be like just like an AI output that you made, or it could be an output that you used being amplified with AI. And the like I've seen some analyses, the subscriptions, like I think the $200 a month subscription to Claude is kind of the equivalent of $8,000 of tokens from Claude API. So you get a fair amount of your baseline for being able to drive stuff into value is pretty high. And so doing that, kind of as a basis. And obviously you can do a bunch of stuff with free things, but it's kind of like it's the showing quality of work. And then, of course, if you've worked with people who have seen the work with AI, then they can also be references.
Mhm. Skills do you think get more valuable as AI gets better, not less?
Well, what is frequently in the industry described as judgment and taste,
Mhm.
being synthetic across things. Like, you know, it's part of the reason I started creating music albums. It's like, oh, let's use these ideas. I'm not like trying to out musician any musicians. That's great. They should be doing that. They should be using AI for it. It's like, oh, well, actually, in fact, here's what you can do with creating holiday music, which the vast majority of musicians don't think about, have some ideas about, and then can use these abilities to do things. Right? That's part of kind of like like creating portfolio to your earlier question, but also it's a um, and showing that you're nimble and flexible. So there's kind of context, there's synthetic across a number of different things. There's the question around like for example, I think part of like as opposed to a GitHub repository, it'll be like here's my included set of skills that are within my OpenClaw, Hermes, other kind of environment. I think those are kinds of things that we'd be playing into it.
Mhm. And what do you think is something about AI that most people get wrong in 5 years?
Well, it's very hard to make these kinds of
Good.
predictions. There's a bunch of very smart people that think that AI will be super intelligent in 5 years in a different way that's super intelligent today. It's already got forms of super intelligence. There's a bunch of stuff AI can do that no human can do in terms of 1.5 trillion tokens of words, ability to interface and do deep research reports from the web and in like minutes, and a bunch of other things which are all versions of super intelligence. Some people think, hey, it'll be inventing fusion in 5 years. I tend to be low percentage of that. I tend to think that will be wrong. I also tend to think that the natural thing for a lot of AI systems is that they are the equivalent of having a panel of 20 experts, giving you an opinion, which means they tend to give you the median,
Yeah.
indeed intelligent, but the median opinion on things. And a lot of things will matter on edge. That's part of the reason why like it's not accidental that AIs tend to be bad. They're good plot writers and bad script writers.
Same with you. There was a question about this on UX and UI.
Yeah.
I think it's the same way. It's like it goes to the median. It's not going to be epically brand new breakthroughs.
Yes, exactly. So that will be the kind of thing that you working with AIs will be adding in to very useful thing. It'll be a very useful tool for amplifying you and for doing stuff, but will require a lot of specific, edgy, contextual, judgment, taste, etc. thinking.
Mhm. Just as we close this out, what's your hope for these students to take on and challenge for the world?
Well, part of the reason I wrote impromptu and super agency is because, like, agency, this can be like agentic intelligence, not just as it's kind of going off and doing stuff, but as amplifying you, amplification intelligence. And the way you discover what that is, because, I have theories about which things will be generally true for humanity, which things will be true for me, and so on. But the way you discover it is by engaging and using it. So actually, in fact, building stuff. And to think about it as kind of an exoskeleton, like we are now all iron people. Like, I am Iron Man. It's like that kind of thing. And to be engaging into it is the thing that really matters. And people say, well, you know, like only dummies are going to read AI for dummies. It's use it, engage with it, right,
Mhm.
for doing that. And that's what I think is my hope. And that's part of the transformation of our social institutions, our companies, all of these things is that, and that, by the way, there'll be a lot of challenges in the transformation, but the way we get it is by building toward, we don't get the future we want by avoiding the futures we don't want. We get the future we want by building specifically towards that future. And that's, part of the reason why you asked me to do this. I was like, sure, I'll show up. I'll try to help.
Well, I appreciate that, Reid. I know everyone does. too, this is no surprise, the most questions we've gotten to date on these things. Maybe if we can, we'll have Reid AI help us out on some of these that we couldn't get to. Uh,
Delighted. Take a copy of them and send them over.
that's exactly what I
Yeah,
was going to do. Send it over
yeah,
to you to throw into the system because I think
yeah.
that would be a great way to do this. I just want to say thank you again, not only for your help, your sponsorship, your mentorship, and so much more. And then to the students, Reid has been kind enough to make sure that anybody who wants a copy of Superintelligence gets one.
Super Agency.
Sorry, Super
There's a different book
Agency.
called Super Intelligence, which is also a very good book. But
That's
yes,
right. Super agency. Thank you.
yes,
Like,
yes,
important clarification.
yeah.
And I also want to take this moment and thank our other sponsors who've given you talent. Remember, you have to sign up to get your Replit account for that free year's worth of Replit. You got to do it before the end of the month. And we've given all the codes and everything there. Also, thank you to Zoom, who's given us all the Zoom rooms and help that way. And also to Tim O'Reilly and the whole O'Reilly team for access for the summer for all the content and all the books and everything. And so, Reid, thank you again as always. It's always inspirational. And then, oh, the most important one. If you guys are sort of feeling like you're not sure how to think about this stuff, you should absolutely go to Possible, Reid's podcast with Aria, and just listen to them. They're short, they're great, and they give you a peek into products and insight that you probably haven't really always had exposure to. So,
And
one to
Parth and I have a series that's just about to start that's very relevant to this stuff.
Oh, perfect. Okay.
Yeah,
We will make sure to get all that to you all.
yeah.
All right, Reid. Thank you so
Within the
much.
possible framework. So great. All right. Thanks all.
All right, everyone. Thank you.